I'd love to introduce Ben Legg. Ben is a globe-trotting CEO and unicorn builder, and he's run operations at household names such as Coca-Cola, Google, and now he's using his global experience and absolute wealth of knowledge to advance the aims of ambitious entrepreneurs who are as passionate as he is about reinventing industries through digital. And in fact, Ben has just become a board member for Mrs. Wordsmith, which is an edtech company looking to redefine how children across the world learn English. And we've also got him as a speaker at the next edition of Chief Disruptor Live. So I'd like to ask a question about a typology of pivoting. What are the different ways to pivot?
The types of pivot. I think there's, in my mind, there's probably 6, and funnily enough, they all begin with R. Reset, recast, redefine, redesign, research, and reconfigure. So, and I've tried to add them roughly in terms of radicalism, let's say. So reset is literally a kind of a slash cost, change, cut headcount, maybe delete some product lines. It's really a sort of simplify things, often focused on cost, but not just cost. It could be complexity or other stuff. It might be, cancel your international expansion plans. But in essence, reset probably with a lower cost base or a simpler business in order to just survive and thrive another day. The second is recast, which might mean take what you do and find new customers. Obviously right now, the biggest customer out there is the NHS or the government in general. So I work with a lot of companies, and I'm reading about others who are all saying, what can I do for the government? I work with actually a laundry company in Oxford, which might sound very dull, but the founder is a NASA scientist, and they were streamlining washing sheets and towels for Airbnb. Might sound tiny, it's actually a very lucrative business. That shrank by 99% in the last 3 weeks. They actually went out and won a bunch of NHS contracts to wash scrubs and sheets and other things. They've just tripled in size in the last 3 weeks. So it's a nice one. Obviously, I'm sure many people have heard about Burberry, who redesigned a factory to make PPE. Obviously, the Excel Conference Center is now a hospital. So right now, a lot of the recast for new customers is focusing on the government, but there are other potential customers out there too. Redefine is redefine your industry. So actually just after the last recession, I left Google and went to a pan-European Yellow Pages company, and they thought of themselves as a print advertising company, but print was dying, partly because print was dying and partly because there was a recession, and in a recession everyone challenges their costs, and a lot of people were canceling their print ads. So we had to redefine ourselves as a local advertising company and say, well, local advertising is not dying. Small businesses need websites. They need to appear on Google. They need to do Facebook advertising. They need videos. They need to email marketing. And so basically redefine the industry we were in. Another recent one, it's a small one, but it's a fun one, is there's a company called Natura. I think they might be London only, they may be bigger. Their primary business is selling fruit and veg to restaurants and hotels. Obviously, restaurants and hotels are all closed. They opened up their supplier buying website to consumers. It's a little rough and ready, but there's an awful lot of people buying through it. They've probably just added a whole B2C business that they didn't have before. And my guess is they'll keep it open, even when the restaurants reopen. So basically redefining what you're in. The fourth redesign would be, maybe redesign your products or your services. You maybe have to redesign, offer financing to your clients to help them stay alive. Maybe redesign, offer some kind of freemium model instead of 100% paid because people can't afford stuff right now. Again, we could go on and on around redesign. Research. All companies I've ever worked with have a parking lot of ideas that they said not now. And I'm lucky. I work with about 20 companies either I've invested in or sit on the board on or whatever. All of them are digging through that list and saying, what are the things we discarded that might be relevant now? And it might be a new product, it might be a new service, it might be a new type of customer, but in essence, dig through the archives, go back through the old strategy decks, go back through your notebook, quite frankly, re-talk to someone who you had an interesting conversation but did nothing with a while ago. All companies have some interesting stuff tucked somewhere, covered in cobwebs that can be dug out. And the sixth and final one, reconfigure, meaning can you actually reconfigure your company? Can you buy a business that can transform your company or break up your company? Right now, there's a lot of companies going cheap. And for example, I know a lot of startups could be anything from like 5 people to 500 people, but who are hoping to raise money about now, and raising money is pretty hard. If the right company big company were to come along and buy them, they'd get them cheap. And it could be the start of a revival of the bigger company and a whole new lease of life for the startup that was at risk of going bust. So, but it doesn't have to be acquire. It could be break stuff up. Maybe you've got a loss-making business that could be amazing over 10 years, but you can't afford to keep it right now, and you sell it off, raise a bit of cash from selling it off to a private equity firm or whatever it might be, and use the cash to redesign the core business. But kind of big restructuring of some sort. So basically reset, recast, redefine, redesign, research, and reconfigure.
Brilliant, thank you. I mean, that's really comprehensive, and I think helps to give people a sense of in sort of times of difficulty, or for businesses, or more widely than that there are a number of options. And I think that's a really important thing for everyone to remember. I guess for some people, being able to pivot sounds like the preserve of startups, or maybe businesses who are perhaps digital at their very core, which is an aspiration of many. What about established organizations? I mean, can you sort of talk about pivoting in that context?
Yes, so I get it that in a big company, a pivot might take a bit longer. That's normal. When you've got a lot more people, a lot more processes, a lot more IT systems, etc. It takes time, but it doesn't mean it can't happen. So yeah, can a startup pivot in 3 weeks? Yes, yes for some, not for all. Can a big company? No, but in 3 months you can do a pretty good pivot. In 6 to 9 months you can do a big one. So. But also big companies typically have more access to finance to get through those 3 months. Some startups will die if they don't pivot in 3 weeks. So it's absolutely possible. I mean, in my life, probably the biggest one that I've been heavily involved in was the one with European directories, whereby we were a print business. When I joined the company, it was $1 billion in revenue, 5,000 employees, 700,000 small business customers around Europe, and 80% of our business was print, and that was declining at 15% a year. It had been like 5, and then suddenly a recession happened. It was 15% a year, and that business that was dying was 43% margin, so it was a very lucrative business. We basically had to build a digital business faster than the print business died. We didn't quite manage it, so overall the business did shrink, but in essence built a really cool, fast-growing, profitable, thriving local business, a local advertising business centered around selling company websites and web presence and lead generation for small businesses. That took, depending on how you define it, it probably took a month or 2 to define and get buy-in, 3 months to get some really good proof points, maybe 9 months till we had serious momentum in all the 8 countries we were operating in. But by about 18 months in, we were the biggest seller of websites in Europe. So it can be done. Yes, it takes a bit longer. All it takes is really vision, leadership, energy, and probably an acceptance that there isn't a plan B, or at least the original plan A won't work. So unless you've got a better plan B, run as fast as you can with plan B.
Thank you. And actually, you've mentioned something there that I think leads on to a question which I think will help people in all sorts of organizations, and that is about leadership. Mm-hmm. Because what leadership skills and personal skills are really useful in a pivot situation, whatever that situation is. Are there some common skills that you think would really help to kind of drive things through?
Yeah, big time. So, and if I think that one through, first of all, in a crisis, everyone just wants leadership, which might sound obvious, but when times are good, in theory, as long as people like their job and the company seems safe and secure and they get some time with their manager, then senior leaders could be relatively invisible, and at least for a period, nothing's going to implode. In times of crisis, all employees want to know, well, what the hell's going on? Are we safe as a company? Do we need to pivot? If so, how? What's the plan for redundancies? What's the plan for bonuses, whatever it might be. So just getting out there and saying, here I am. This is what I know. This is what I don't know. This is how I'm going to work out the things I don't know. If you've got ideas, here's how to feed them to me. Here's what we do tomorrow. A lot of people, when they're planning, in a crisis, forget to tell people what they need to actually do tomorrow, because it's all focused on it 3 weeks out or 3 months out or whatever. And then regular updates. So, whether it's daily or weekly, will depend on the pace with which information is unfolding. But as fast as you can to make the any painful changes, whether it's cuts or furlough or whatever it might be, and then get those that are staying on the bus focused on the future. Right, okay, we have defined the future. It is this product suite, or it is this service, or it is this geography, or it is this this way of working. These are the core activities. These are the team leaders. I haven't worked it all out yet, but it's your job to help your leader work it out. Try and get people to feel, I don't need to wait till I'm told what to do, but I'm in this too. I know what team I'm in. I know who my boss is. I know the mission they've been given. How do I sort of help make it a success? And then constant iteration, because obviously fast change does involve mistakes, or just misalignments happening. So constantly updating, not just at the CEO level, but business unit level or team level, whatever. We tried to do this. This is working. That's not working. We need to change this. We're stuck here. We're going to talk to that team there. But constantly just sort of staying on top of what's working, what's not, where are we versus plan, etc. For starters, it actually means you get a lot done really fast. But secondly, it takes people's mind off worrying because they're too busy to worry, which is a good thing.
Excellent. Thanks very much. And I think, as I said, that's useful because it sort of gives this real world experience. And I think things that you've mentioned there are absolutely critical to keep that communication flowing. We've just to sort of pause for 1 second. So we've got a few questions coming through, which is excellent. So people are using the Q&A box, and I'm going to go to them in just a minute. If anybody has any other questions, I'm sure that a lot of what Ben has said has sparked various thoughts. Then do pop them in there. We'll get through as many as we can. Just very briefly, I mean, I wondered is there one single thing that holds organizations back from doing some of the things that you have suggested? Just one single thing before we move into questions.
Well, it probably is a lack of leadership. Literally, it's like people don't feel they have the right to lead, so they're kind of waiting for someone to say, you have the right to not do your day job but do something else. But given we just talked about leadership, I'll add one more, which is feeling like they are incentivized and belong in the new normal. People need to know, am I on the bus or off the bus? And what's going to happen to, my pay, my bonus, my security, etc. It's not just about money, but obviously security matters at times like now. But if I'm in, great. What's my job and what do you need me to do? And if I'm out, okay, when do I leave? And what's going to happen to me financially and healthcare and anything else? So just people's clarity about themselves. It comes a little bit back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Is if you're worried about your health or your job or your family, it's very hard to focus on your job. So you need to sort of make sure that people know where they are on the basics.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Thank you. So that's it from my questions. And what I'd like to do now is move to, we've got 3 fantastic questions, and I'm pretty sure we'll have time to answer those all. Some of them I think will are pretty testing. So we'll start off with Ross's. Ross Simpson, thanks so much for typing that through. So how do we know which direction to pivot in to get a 10 times benefit versus 10%? Do you test and learn, or do you just go for it? I think that's great.
Yeah, it's a really good question. As much as you can when you're defining the ways you could pivot. Clearly, you don't just go with the first pivot. You've got to think about what are the 3 ways we can pivot, or the 10 ways we can pivot. Trying to work out market sizing and likelihood of success is important. It's basically, this is like, a lot of companies take 3 months or more to work out their strategy process. It's like trying to do that in a week, probably. Is what are all the things we could do? Have we consulted, the right people? Have a bit of a brainstorm on Zoom, obviously. Who can work out market sizing? How competitive are the different pivots we're going to do, etc. are important. Otherwise, as you say, a pivot could either be something that is an amazing moonshot where you got a 1% chance of success, or it could be something that sounds amazing but actually is only going to, give you incremental growth. Or in the current crisis, obviously a lot of companies are having massive amounts of revenue slashed, or 30-40% whatever or more, and you don't want to pivot that's going to give you 2% extra revenue because it doesn't fill the hole. Or at least, if you got 2, you need another 10 of those or more to fill the hole. So trying to quantify it is really important. And obviously a lot of it is like market size, market share, probability of success, that kind of thing. It's hard to be more precise than that because it depends so much on industry, etc.
Absolutely, but at least, I mean, there's kind of a method and a strategy to apply.
Yeah.
To move to Will Silverwood has asked a question. So to pivot, if you have to keep the existing business running until you have your new proposition tested and live, so you need to rapidly mobilize a team, and what's the balance and considerations between using existing people who really know your business, but they may be stuck in the past, versus new external expertise who may go on to run the new business? So yeah, must a situation and decisions that occur all the time.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm always wary of doing something at 100% external or 100% internal, because I think both have risks. As I say, the internal people, it might take a while to free them up. They may not have the right skill set. They may be too stuck in the way things happen now. But 100% outside people, they may totally miss the point, or write plans that can't be achieved, or just fail to connect with the organization. So in my mind, almost all pivot teams should be a mix of fresh thinking from the outside and internal people to keep it grounded, but also they'll know where to find the data. They'll have networks of who to consult for. There's a report I need from such and such. There was an offsite we had here and we discussed such and such. There's a data source here that we can pull. Internal people are incredibly helpful. But so I'd say the more different the pivot from what you do now, the more weight towards external people. The more it's reconfiguring, let's say, detailed processes and operations, probably the more you need internal people. So if it's a case of, I don't know, if you're a bank, you're going to shuffle the branches and go to mobile, you probably need more internal people, because shutting branches isn't something external people would find very easy to do. Whereas if it's like, do you know what, we need to sell in China because they're reopening and everything else is shutting, you probably need some China experts, and I doubt you have them in-house. So it's kind of, you probably never want to be more than 70-30. You don't want to be like 90% external or 90% internal, but for something that's radically new, it might be 70% external people, 30% internal. For something that's reconfiguring what you are, it's probably more like 70% internal, 30% external, something like that. The one thing I would say right now is there's a lot of really awesome people available. It is a great time to hire if you can. So you might want to pick up a few people. And the good news right now is because people are a little bit desperate, you can get people on a 3-month contract and see how they work out, as opposed to permanent contracts. So there's a lot of good people to be had.
And a time to be pragmatic, very much so. I want to ask one question that's come through on this theme, and then I'd like to move to a couple of questions which actually start to look a bit about timeframes and uncertainty, also critical. But before we move to them, thinking about the situation we're in, a lot of people working at distance. So how do you pull people together and ensure people are with you when you pivot, when we're in a remote access situation like now? Yeah,
obviously there's an element of how good did you build those relationships before, because obviously human trust does come with connection. And so if you already had an awesome team spirit, you should be able to keep it going much more easily than if you now say, oh shit, now team spirit actually matters. But I mean, personally, I feel like you can do it. So, what I've been doing in the companies I've been doing, obviously there's a ton of Zoom. There's also a ton of WhatsApp. There's a ton of sharing notes. One CEO I've been mentoring just went down with coronavirus last week. He lives about half a mile from me. I'm delivering food. It's like, you got to be a bit more human. So make sure you're helping people out on the stuff that matters, not just, giving people tasks or inspecting their homework, as it were. So, whether it's, a lot of companies now are doing like virtual happy hours on a Friday where everyone grabs a glass, and does a debrief on the week. There's show and tells I've seen many companies do where the product team's doing, sort of, here's what we made this week. if you are in a pivot situation, there's updates. So the company that's doing, just won the NHS contract, it's taken about 3 weeks to get it, and about every second day it was updates on this is what I think is in the contract, this is what it will take to fulfill it. We need to expand capacity here, we need to change the way we do pickups and delivery, all sorts of random interesting stuff. If you like to geek out, like laundry bags are actually plastic that dissolves in hot water in hospitals. I didn't know that, but there you go. Anyway, all sorts of interesting stuff, and just coming up with the to-do list saying we're on top of this, we haven't fixed this. It kind of helps people feel like they're part of the program, even if they're waiting for instructions. They're kind of seeing how it's evolving, and so they A, feel it's been like their plan, but B, they might have ideas they can chuck in, and C, when they're finally briefed, they actually understand the underlying changes going on. So I think it's a mixture of keep people involved, keep up team morale, make sure that people's basic human needs are met, not just their sort of work needs, etc.
Absolutely. I think we've got time, if we just sort of got about another 5 minutes, so I think we've got time to do sort of 2 or 3 questions. Now, if we move to the time frame and the horizon element, because that's in the foreground for a lot of people at the moment, thinking about how long things, current situations will be going on for. So there's 2 aspects of this. There's 2 questions, one from Dan Farney and then another one. So how long and into the future can you plan with the level of uncertainty, I guess, we have at the moment? So that's a great crystal ball question.
Mm-hmm.
But the other aspect, I think, is about how long do you give this new direction before you accept it's not the right one?
Yeah. So there's 2 parts there, which is, I guess, yeah. Okay. So let me think about it. So obviously, in the current direction, none of us know whether this is a 6 to 9 month mini recession, and then collectively governments, health systems, etc., get on top of the virus, and we're into the new normal, or is it a 3-year recession with people like Donald Trump in charge? So it's kind of, it could be a 3-year crisis, it could be a 9-month blip, and obviously we also need to try and work out what is the new normal. And we're not going to go back to the way things were. At least very few industries will, because there's so many new habits being formed and things like that. So I think, to me, what I'm seeing companies do is say, we want to pivot as fast as we possibly can. So, for startups, that might be 3 weeks. For bigger companies, I work with some companies with hundreds and occasionally thousands of employees, but not tens of thousands. It might be, we want to be ready for when we get out of the shutdown, so have something ready in June. And really, it's a case of, the best question is, can we prove things out while we're on lockdown, so that the new offerings, products, services, whatever, we can put our foot on the gas come, let's say, June, when the lockdown's over. That's the dream scenario. But obviously, sometimes proving things out requires people to be out of lockdown in order to do that. So it's hard without looking at a specific plan, but I would say you need to prove things out, ideally under lockdown or within the first 2 to 4 weeks after lockdown, and have the resources ready to slam the foot on the gas if things work. And if not, have a different plan. So, whether it's a new product, a new service, whatever, if it's digital, roll it out now. People are on lockdown, that's great. If it's not digital, then roll it out as soon as lockdown's over. But can you roll it out in one geography and say, right, define the metrics? If we meet this metric around customer acquisition costs, retention rates, whatever it might be, then that is the equivalent of success. We've got whatever X million sitting in a marketing budget ready to go, and all the other resources required to scale it. And if it doesn't work, here are the 2 or 3 things we could do next. So you definitely need a kind of a pivot of foot on the gas with plan A, or you've got a backup plan B. Was that both questions, or was that one? I'm forgetting.
I think you might have gone to both, but actually,
okay.
There is one question that I think we've got time, and I want to change tack a little bit, because this will pick up on your investor expertise, which I know people are always interested to hear about. So I've got a question from Paul, which is about your view on whether VC and private equity firms going to dry up on funding versus the bigger guys that are going to be using this as an opportunity to buy, I don't know, even more tech and sort of digitally advanced companies on the cheap. So I guess it's what this competition for funding really.
Yeah. So at the very, very macro level, it's tougher right now because most private equity firms and VC firms have existing portfolios. And within those portfolios, typically there's a big chunk of companies struggling. And so the VCs and the private equity firms are saying, we have to prioritize our own portfolio. And if we need to do cash injections into those, we will. But that doesn't mean there's no funding. You know, if you keep your eye out on deals, there are deals happening, albeit most of them were being discussed before the lockdown. So in essence, if a deal is being discussed before lockdown and the company hasn't been hit by the lockdown, the deals are still happening. If not, they're being cancelled or renegotiated. Now, I probably talk to about 2 investors a day. So I think I've got my finger on a reason pulse. More VCs than private equity, but I talk to both. And I would say probably 1 in 10 funds is so new that they don't have a portfolio with problems. So they're sitting on dry powder. Those guys are smiling very broadly right now because they've got dry powder and everything just got 30% cheaper. So in general, so there are some funds like that. There are also some private equity funds who've been less hit or has so much money to invest that they can still invest. And there are also some private equity funds and others who have interesting debt mechanisms that you can borrow debt. And I've seen the terms and I haven't got around to signing anything yet, but some of them look interesting too. So if you genuinely believe in your business, but raising private equity or VC money is going to take too long, then there are some debt mechanics too. But if you know, let's say before the lockdown, your company had a, whatever, 80% chance of raising finance, it's probably just gone down to 30 or 40. So the adage of make sure you survive and worry about raising money later is good advice if you can. But if you can't, it's not impossible. It just got harder.
Thank you. Thanks very much for that. We're going to have to sort of stop the Q&A there, and I'm really sorry because there are a couple of really good questions that have come through. However, particularly looking about the kind of the post-coronavirus world and where we might see that moving. And I know that you said that is a whole other conversation. So I think thank you for submitting those questions. I think we're going to park them and we'll see what we can do with those maybe in a couple of weeks. It might be something that we can talk about. We can talk about in another scenario such as this. So I'm going to hand back over to Emma, but I wanted to say, Ben, thank you so much. Absolutely fascinating discussion, certainly for this time of the morning. I think everyone's really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Okay.
And back over to you, Emma.
And just to echo Jess's words, and Jess indeed to you, thank you very, very much. I was scribbling away on a personal note as well in terms of some of those words of wisdom and indeed that advice. I think, you know, these unprecedented times cause us to really rethink. And I think that there are opportunities for people to make something positive out of this, that as and when we come out of lockdown and indeed when we start to see that new norm really unfold, we'll all hopefully be able to take some of that away and really have seen the benefit. Change can happen today, literally today, and we do hope that some of you are now feeling inspired that you can actually start to make those changes and start to see new ways of working with your teams in your own environments and so on. Ben has been invaluable to us as an advisory board member, and we're incredibly grateful to him. He's also going to be speaking with us and for us at Chief Disruptor Live virtual on the 2nd of June. So please do register for that. It's actually over the whole day of the 2nd of June, but actually you can pop in and pop out. There are masterclasses going on, there are keynotes, there are panels, and various other fireside chats and so on. So we'd love you to join us, and we'll send you a link to that afterwards.